Queen Elizabeth II, the United Kingdom's longest-serving monarch, died at Balmoral, aged 96, after reigning for 70 years. She died peacefully on Thursday afternoon at her Scottish estate, where she had spent much of the summer. It was an appropriately dark and dreary day, and one many prayed would never come. How will people conceive of life without Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, the heart and focus of this nation's love and loyalty? For millions of people, she was the mother of this nation, and the literal embodiment of the United Kingdom which she so cherished. The shock will be immense and the grief unmeasured, as we have already seen. Even people in their 70s have never known life without her. She was an anchor of stability in a changing world and an exemplar of conduct and courtesy, one who, from the highest position in the land, showed people day by day the virtues of dignity, civility, humility, truthfulness, and service. The Queen. 2 little words that identified her instantly in 7 continents and 100 languages. Can we conceive, never again, hearing that voice, that kindly, gentle voice, as we heard it from that very throne at our state openings, giving in her royal broadcasts at Christmas, or lately, during lockdown, her unvarying message of faith and hope? Her voice was warmly encouraging to so many people on her myriad daily visits to hospitals, schools, factories, and all the public places in cities, towns, and villages across the United Kingdom and all her realms and territories, indeed, the whole world. No one ever questioned her work ethic. She was queen for everyone, every place, and every generation. In an unusually public remark, because Her Majesty had that diamond among virtues, discretion, Her Majesty said of the husband that she so loved, the late Prince Philip, that he was quite simply her strength and stay all these years. So was she to the nation, and to all the countries and peoples of the great commonwealth that she, herself, beyond all others nurtured, and to which she was devoted. She was the strength and stay for 70 years, firm in her duty, wise in her counsel, reassuring in her smile, and gracious in her every act, whether in stretching out the hand of reconciliation in Ireland, or encouraging a timorous child hovering with a bouquet that he dared not present. How many tens of millions of people over 70 long years have travelled, sometimes hundreds of miles, to see her, the most famous woman in the world, although that was the very last thing she would ever have sought to be. Having seen her, they were touched by her warmth and went home with joy in their hearts, secure that there was a sparkle of goodness and a spirit of good humour in the world. Her Majesty had humour and wit. People were just glad that she had come to their little corner of the world. Frankly, people were just glad that she was there. For as they loved the public queen, they also loved the private queen, with her dogs and horses, and her joy in Scotland's countryside, wherein she died. Many who came to see her were from other nations, not her subjects, on her state visits or on their visits to this country. She was our nation's greatest magnet and our finest diplomat. None will ever have forgotten that day when they saw her, however long ago it was. All of us, whether we knew her or not, felt that we knew her, and were glad that we knew her. Of all the different things we felt we knew, the one thing we all surely knew lies in that one word, duty. Hers was a life given to duty, to the service of her peoples, service to others, unceasing, utterly selfless service given with resilience and forbearance, even in the most difficult times. From that moment, in her 21st birthday broadcast, when she declared that her whole life would be devoted to service, to her sacred coronation oath, to what we witnessed this last week, when this quite extraordinary woman summoned the last drops of her strength to say farewell to her 14th Prime Minister and appoint her 15th. It was duty. Many people make promises, and all fall short of them. In 1947 and 1953, Her Majesty made one great and solemn vow of lifelong service, and she honoured it without flinch or blemish for 75 years. Therein was another quality of Her Majesty: constancy and courage. The courage that we saw when, at Trooping the Colour, a demented man fired shots at her that no one then knew were blanks. That consummate horsewoman steadied her horse, and just got on with it, as was the case with her generation. She displayed that courage this last week too, even unto the threshold of death. In that very first 21st birthday broadcast, so soon after a war that scorched and stole the flower of her youth, she said something else to the young people of Britain and the Commonwealth. It is often overlooked, but it should not be forgotten. She said that they must never be daunted by anxieties and hardships. Her Majesty was never daunted. She always persevered. And I venture to suggest that, with no disrespect to the first mighty Queen Elizabeth, that here was the greatest sovereign this country has ever had. Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor was born on the 21st of April 1926 in a house just off Berkeley Square in London. The first child of Albert, Duke of York, second son of George V and his Duchess, the former Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon. Both Elizabeth and her sister Margaret Rose, who was born in 1930, were educated at home and brought up in a loving family atmosphere. Elizabeth was extremely close to both her father and her grandfather, George V. At the age of 6, Elizabeth told her riding instructor that she wanted to become a country lady with lots of horses and dogs. She was said to have shown a remarkable sense of responsibility from a very early age. Winston Churchill, the future Prime Minister, was quoted as saying that she possessed an air of authority that was astonishing in an infant. Despite not attending school, Elizabeth proved adept at languages and made a detailed study of constitutional history. A special Girl Guides company, the first Buckingham Palace, was formed so that she could socialise with girls of her own age. On the death of George V in 1936, his eldest son, known as David, became Edward VIII. However, his choice of wife, the twice-divorced American Wallis Simpson, was deemed to be unacceptable on political and religious grounds. At the end of the year, he abdicated. A reluctant Duke of York became King George VI. His coronation gave Elizabeth a foretaste of what lay in store for her, and she later wrote that she had found the service very, very wonderful. Against a background of increasing tension in Europe, the new king, together with his wife Queen Elizabeth, set out to restore public faith in the monarchy. Their example was not lost on their elder daughter. It is only a matter of weeks since tribute was paid to the Queen on the occasion of her Platinum Jubilee. On that occasion we knew that the Queen was already in frail health, but few contemplated that her reign had such a short period ahead of it. Because the Queen is the only monarch most people have known, and was a permanent, reassuring presence in a challenging and rapidly changing world, her death has clearly come to millions as a great shock. A hitherto ever-present feature of British life has been removed, and a deep sense of loss is clearly felt by many. What was the basis of this universal appeal? It is because she demonstrated qualities that appeal across and down the ages. She was a constant. As the world changed, as prime ministers and presidents came and went, she exuded a sense of serenity and calm, and, in times of national trauma and tragedy, a sense that these difficulties were surmountable, that they should be met with fortitude, and that they would pass. She was unwavering in her commitment to the service of the nation, and to her duty to represent its traditions and values, but she was sensitive to changing times, realizing that the monarchy too had to change, had to be more open, more accessible, and more accountable for everything it did. She was empathetic. For someone whose daily life was as different as it is possible to be from that of the vast majority of her subjects, she had an ability to communicate with them as individuals, to put them at ease, and to make them feel truly special. She had a great sense of humour. This no doubt helped her with the vagaries of her own life. But she used it effortlessly to diffuse potentially difficult situations and to put the thousands of people she met at ease. She had a zest for life, and for the role she had been allotted, just like at the picture taken earlier this week as she met the new Prime Minister. That smile was genuine and heartwarming. She appealed to people's better natures. Every year, in her Christmas broadcast, she championed the values of community, generosity, kindness, and service to others. The country shares them, and looked to the Queen to champion them, which she unfailingly did. These qualities were underpinned by two constants in her own life. The first was her marriage to Prince Philip, whom she repeatedly called her Rog. For anyone who saw them together, there was no doubting that this was indeed the case. The second was her religious faith. This not only provided a source of strength and comfort for her, but underpinned her approach to being the monarch. There is, in the Book of Common Prayer, the evocative concept of an individual's bounden duty. The Queen applied this concept not only to her spiritual life, but to her public role. She understood the importance of that duty for a monarch, and she fulfilled her duties, one might say religiously, literally, to the end of her life. It is no surprise that there will be an outpouring of affection, respect, love, and indeed grief for the disappearance from people's lives of this great Queen. We do have to remember that she was the Queen to men and women who were born in Queen Victoria's age. We have to remember that she, in her generation, was one of that generation for whom the horrors, the fears, the catastrophe of the Second World War lived bright and dark. For that generation, the arrival of a new princess to become queen, mourning the loss of her beloved father, and yet assuming her responsibilities without hesitation, was a moment that reflected the possibility in those austere times of a great future for this country. To the extent that there has been a great future, the country is indebted to her for her contribution to it. As it is now, the young still adore her. It is something to do with style, approach, commitment, the ability to get the best out of everybody she was speaking to, that fixed the affection forever and kept her in the warmth of so many people's hearts. No other leader of a country in world history has ever travelled so much, or met more leaders and people from other countries. As one American publication put it, among Queen Elizabeth II's many talents was an ability to turn the most powerful man on the planet into an overexcited fanboy, tea with the Queen outranking a nuclear arsenal. What kind of person would be willing to sacrifice their own preferences, private life, and retirement plans for the sake of a nation and family of nations? the form of sacrifice that certain other individuals would do well, but will not, of course, to reflect upon and emulate. What kind of person would be prepared to carry out such a punishing schedule of public engagements with extraordinary grace, month after month and year after year, even 3 or 4 decades after most of their contemporaries have opted for a quiet life of golf or daytime television? What kind of person would put up with the endless intrusions of the press, making the odd family annus horribilis, with which we have heard, infinitely more difficult to bear? What kind of person would offer a listening ear to politicians, prime ministers and presidents alike, while holding to the discipline of never straying into the political arena themselves? Again, an example that others would do well to reflect upon, but will fail to do so. It is a strong and courageous person, a person whose commitment to duty, as we have heard, or from others, overrode all else. The nation has lost a queen. The people have lost one of the best servants they have ever known in this or any other age. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.